Okay, hey everybody. I think we are officially live. How's everybody doing tonight on Halloween Eve? Hope you're all doing well. Hope the sound is coming through okay on everybody's end. We are in week 4 this week, which means we are covering food truck laws and food truck builds in extensive detail. And food truck laws, of course, super kind of tough and kind of complicated just because they're different no matter where you are. But I think you'll find out that most of the time there's a certain number of people that you've got to talk to and kind of get the boxes checked off to get approvals in your area. It's just a matter of trying to figure out who those people to talk to are the best or are the right people to talk to in each location. And then the food truck build out portion. I know some of you already have food trucks or trailers, but I'll be diving into how Anthony purchased his and plenty of lessons to be learned there of what not to do, of course, as per the usual from him. So how's it going tonight, Anthony?
Oh, it's going great. Another fine evening in sunny Albuquerque.
Cool. So let's, I guess, start off with the food truck laws portion.
Yeah. So I wanted to actually start tonight by telling a story from our first food truck class. And Brett, you probably remember this gentleman who was in our class, and he bought a truck before the class started and started going through the permitting process. And I remember, hearing this story. His idea was really cool. He had bought this really nice retro truck, and he had all these grand ideas for it. And he started going through the permitting process and learned that much on a vehicle that would never be, used for a food truck. And so he basically went through the class and found out that he should probably, he basically found that this thing was permitted improperly and he needed to go back and do it all over again. And so the long story short was the moral of the story is if you don't know your food truck, if you don't know the food truck regulations in your city, and every city is very different. If you don't know the regulations in your city, you could be putting yourself in a precarious position when it comes to actually buying the truck. And so, a little bit later, we'll talk about food truck builders. Actually, let's just talk about that now. When you're finding a food truck builder, a lot of them know the regulations in your area. And if they don't know it, you either better make sure that you know the laws backwards and forwards, or maybe just go and shop with somebody who knows the laws a little bit better, because it kind of is their job to make sure that they're giving you a quality product, but it's also your job to make sure that the product that you're receiving is going to work for your business. And you don't want to end up in a situation where you literally just lost like $20, $30, $40, $50,000 or more because, there was a hiccup in the system, or you didn't do your homework, or whatever. That's a huge financial loss to deal with, and you definitely don't want to be put in that position. So finding a dealer or a builder that's in your area is crucial, I would say. Food Truck Empire, right? Don't you have like a repository of builders by region?
Yep.
Yeah. So you have you can go on Brett's site, Food Truck Empire, and find builders in your region and talk to them. Every single builder should be willing to share with you, their process, provide you a quote. And it's not it's not like a simple thing like, hey, I want a food truck. I want to make sure I have a fridge and a stove. A good builder will want to know what you're going to use it for. They're going to want to tailor it to what you're doing. And they're going to want to make sure that you're going to get something that's going to work really well, because they want you to refer them future business. And so definitely find someone in your area. You want to make sure also that they will show you basically who their client list is. You know, think of like a builder as like a, you know, any other professional, that service professional. They have a portfolio of things that they've done, and you want access to that portfolio, because a reputable builder will happily share with you, you know, other trucks that they've done, so you can go check them out and, one, see the quality of their work, and two, you know, trust that you're getting something that you can believe in, and, you know, thus pay them $50,000 to, you know, obviously it doesn't have to be that much, but pay them quite a large sum of money just to have your business up and running. So this is like really no small task. So, you know, we're going to spend this first portion of the class talking about the regulations, so that you know what to look for to navigate the system, so you can talk with the builders and find out, you know, what they do to meet those needs, and also so that you can just make a sound financial decision and get your business up and running. So the list of, let's see what I have here. The list of, you know, permitting agencies basically determines what the laws of your area are. So we've talked in the past about health permits. We've talked about, I think we've talked about fire safety, just mentioning it, that kind of, you know, who do you go to get a fire inspection? Because the truck is kind of viewed as like a driving bomb because of the propane tank. So the city and your state will have its own like licensing, and that's mostly business licensing, but sometimes you'll also need to worry about like health inspection, fire inspection on the larger scale and the city scale. But for the most part, the city is where you'll go to for most of the permitting other than state licensing. Health inspection definitely is a must, no matter where you are. The process for that will be a little bit different. For instance, we've talked in the past about getting a commissary kitchen. Not every city requires this, and not every city has like a very strict definition of what a commissary is. Sometimes it's just a place that you can do prep out of. Sometimes it's just a place where you're storing your food. That really depends on what the health permitting process requires, and also what your health inspector, who will come check out all your digs, requires in the inspection process. One thing I forgot to mention, advocate for, is becoming very friendly with, at least, you know, professionally friendly with the permitters, you know, all the inspectors. And as it was presented to me when we were going through all of this, these guys, their whole job is to make sure that the public is safe. So they don't want to run around and shut you down. They want to have a good working relationship. They want you to make money. They want the public to be safe. So it's obviously like the best of both worlds that those things are happening. But they're not, you know, they're obviously getting paid to make sure that you're doing things the right way and the safe way. And so they're not, you know, they're not looking to ding you and prevent businesses from opening up. They're really just, you know, think of it from that motivation, and you'll be able to build a working relationship that will, you know, pay dividends in the long run. So for instance, when I got started, you know, I just went out and tried to talk to the, you know, like the people in the health permitting office just to find out what the process was. They, you know, told me, like, based on where my commissary was, that there's, it was kind of like a dry run in that sense, figuring out, you know, what are you going to be looking for? What kind of questions are you going to be asking me, so that we can make sure that we have our truck set up So we'll pass inspection with flying colors so that we're not wasting your time, we're not wasting our own time. And then ever since that moment, you know, we've had this relationship with the inspector so that, you know, he calls us up and says, hey, we need to do an inspection soon. We try and find dates that work for both of us so that he doesn't have to worry about like doing a pop-in, and we don't have to worry about like, you know, making sure that we're disrupting our service or anything like that. And these kinds of relationships have paid dividends on all fronts. We discovered here in New Mexico that there is this organization called the New Mexico Gas Bureau. And their job is to go around the state and make sure that anybody who's operating with propane follows a very specific set of laws. And at the time we got started, almost no food truck knew that this New Mexico Gas Bureau even existed. And so basically they only really have enough personnel to show up to really large events and stuff like that. But knowing that way ahead of time actually saved us a ton of money, because it allowed us to know exactly how big of a propane tank we can have, where on the truck we can put the pro truck itself. And so having, you know, knowing what the New Mexico Gas Bureau requires, meeting the inspectors ahead of time, laying it all on the line, like saying, okay, what exactly do we need to do to make sure that we're in compliance, and go from there. And, you know, we've met them at events, and they know like the inspection is going to be pretty easy because they check everything ahead of time. But also, you know, being able to have this kind of relationship with them allows it to be easier for us and easier for them, and they can focus their efforts where you know, the issues may actually be. So let's see. Brett, you look like
yeah. So you mentioned, I guess, just breaking down where you've got to go specifically, and you know we've got this on a checklist that we can send it after the class too, and it's in the class area also. But the city you need to go to, the state you need to go to, correct?
Yep.
And who would you like? Where would you typically like reach out to? Because obviously it's going to be a little bit different no matter where someone's located. But like for the city and state, like where would you typically start looking for those requirements? If you're still there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yep.
I was saying, yeah, the first place that I'd go check out is, you know, when you go to your like business registration department, whatever that would be called in your city, just ask them what the process is for registering a new business, and specifically like a restaurant business. And then you could be more specific and say like, you know, I'm opening up a food truck. What do I need to do? What are the steps for opening up a food truck? But don't expect them to have all the answers. Know that like the next person that they refer you to is going to know a little.
Okay. I see. Yeah, it's been a little bit choppy at times. I tried to lower the audio, the video quality a little bit that way to speed it up a little bit, and basically so we don't use as much bandwidth. So hopefully that'll solve the issue.
All right. So where did I get lost? Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. I can anyways.
All right. So where was I left off?
I guess city and state licenses, where would you go first in your area to like look for those?
Yeah, so obviously like City Hall, you'll go to like the business registration department. And ask them this, know exactly what what the laws will be for a food truck. Because once they know like restaurant, they'll be able to point you in the right direction. And then that next person will, they'll probably say like, you need to get a health permit first and foremost. And then that person, the health inspector, the health permitting office will know a bit more and be able to say, okay, for a food truck, you'll need, for a restaurant, you'll need health inspection, you'll need fire inspection, but for a food truck, you also need to make sure that you do this, this, and this. So those are the best things to go to.
Yeah. And this, and like with what Anthony said, because Anthony got started too, just for context, like a few years ago when less people knew what food trucks actually even were. If you plan to be operating in, like, I know there's folks in like Austin here, and if you want to operate in like a San Diego or a Boston, any like major place like that, just do a Google search, San Diego food truck laws. More than likely, you'll be able to just find the information that you need for your city there to get started, all just published online. But what like Anthony's referencing is more like if you live in a smaller place, it's not like easily found online, the instructions for getting started from like a health permit standpoint, then like that's the process that you would want to take. But like, again, if you're planning to launch your truck in a bigger city, fortunately that information is probably just like a Google search away, and then you'll have like your official document from the city, and then it's just a matter of, following the instructions basically.
Yeah, when I got started, I could find information for most cities online. Albuquerque was a bit of a hassle, but also a couple of organizations that were like small business related, that small business development centers kind of, that had like a list of like what food trucks were required to do. And so I basically had to like, you still want to do this. Make sure that when you talk with like your business registration department and your health inspection department, that even if you find these lists of like what to do, that you confer with these organizational entities, because they have the final say. Like it doesn't matter like what you find online, as long as it's coming from like the city office, because that's where like the final yes and no's come from. So you're going to want to talk with these people anyway. And any information you find really just kind of gives you like a direction to focus your attention
on. Okay, so good question from Carol. Does each inspection, is that going to have a separate cost?
Yeah, depending on what city you're in, the costs are going to differ. Like I would expect New York and LA to have very high costs for these sorts of things. As a bearing, I guess, like Albuquerque is relatively cheap. The business registration was like a one-time fee of, I think it was $50 to like register no, it was $100. It was $100 to register the business, and that registration lasts forever. The health inspection is a yearly thing, and that's $50 for the year for 2 inspections, basically. So you get inspected twice a year. The fire marshal inspects us once a year, but we only have to pay one. We only had to pay the one time when we first registered, and that was like $15. And the LP Gas Bureau, like if they show up and inspect you at an event, they won't charge you, but to have like an inspection off-site or where they have to like come out, it was like, I think it's like $25. So it really depends on like a city, what state usually have its own separate costs. So you're getting a get book ready and just write each department down and just keep tabs. Which is another important thing, is like as you're, figuring out what what entities you need to go through and what hoops you need to jump through. Keep a documentation of like, okay, I need to get this permit, I need to get this permit, and the inspection is going to cost this amount. That'll help keep you a running tally, especially because when we do the financial analysis in a couple weeks, you'll be able to at least like put that right in your first month operating expenses. Like, I know what all the permit costs are. It's going to be, $500 for all the business licenses.
Here's another good question from Regina too. It seems that my state doesn't require a commissary kitchen, but the city does. And, does the city typically outweigh the state, or does like the state outweigh the city in those types of situations?
The winning entity is the one where you're like, whichever entity is you're in the jurisdiction of. So for instance, like the state of New Mexico doesn't require a commissary, but the city of Albuquerque does. And the county of Bernalillo, which is what Albuquerque's inside of, only needed a commissary for certain things. So if like we're doing all of our vending in Albuquerque and we have our business license through the city of Albuquerque, we have to abide by the city of Albuquerque's laws. So we need a commissary. But if we're like, in I'm not going to use Santa Fe because that's a bad example, but the next largest city is like Las Cruces. We wouldn't need a commissary because that's not what's required by the state. But so because of that, we're able to operate in Albuquerque, but that's not where our home base is. So we would abide by the state law. So it really depends on like where your base of operations, like essentially your mailing address and your business license address, where are those things? And that's going to pretty much require, tell you like what jurisdiction you're in. And again, some cities might have, a specification about that. So for instance, I think DeOne was looking at doing vending in multiple cities, like New York City and maybe some places in New Jersey and some places in like upstate New York. And so, you'll have like the New York City permitting in that case, but, you might also have to get different permit licenses for, the cities that you're doing in New Jersey and the cities that you're doing outside of New York City. And, you'll just have to kind of play their game. So some places have like these handshake agreements where like, if you have a license in this city that works in our city, but some places are like, I don't care what license you have, you're going to have to get licensed through us as well.
So all of that put simply, Regina probably has to get a commissary, huh?
Yeah.
In the city.
If you're in the city, you'll probably have to get a commissary.
Okay. Let's see. So Katie makes a good point too. It's important to get your permit process going basically as you're building your truck, especially in a large city, because it can take 2 months to receive. Like how long did the process take for you? Like obviously yours is going to be, I would assume, probably faster than where a lot of folks might be operating just because it's a little bit smaller.
Yeah, for us it was actually yet until we got our inspections by everybody else. And we basically had to turn in all of these, documentation to get the business license. And that came about a month after we finished everything. Our health inspection certificate, we got the day that we were inspected. Like the city of Albuquerque health inspectors have these like tiny printers and, surface computers that they use to like do the inspection, type up the report right then and there, and then just print it out. So that was pretty cool. And but when they do that now, but when we first got started, they just like, gave us a piece of paper that they filled out with a stamp, and then we took it to the health inspection office to get like the official certificate. But I remember that the fire marshal inspection was actually like we did the inspection, and then 5 minutes later we got the official like inspection certificate, and I was very surprised at how quick that turnaround was. So like literally once we like had all this documentation, we just went to the city office and got our business registration, you know, mailed to us because they wanted to mail it to the registered address. But it was pretty quick. It was like, you know, 2 weeks after, I think it was, yeah, it was 2 weeks after we completed our inspection that we like, and turned in our paperwork, that we got our license back. So we were able to go pretty quickly. I have heard in some places that these things take, you know, a really long time depending on the city infrastructure and governmental policies and that sort of stuff.
Let's see. Katie mentions too, she registered her truck at her daughter's address in Eastern Washington. It saved close to $1,000 on taxes and fees versus Seattle. So that's pretty interesting. Sounds like that's a definitely saves a lot of money. Let's see. George asks, did you have to get a food manager certificate?
New Mexico, no. But my brother, he hasn't actually gone through this permitting in a little while, but he was ServSafe certified when we started, just in case like we had to go through that kind of thing. But it turns out here in New Mexico, that's not required. But some cities actually do require that. So this is one of those reasons why like you need to at least ask around quickly, even if it only takes you, you know, a day or two, just to find out if it is required.
Let's see. So DeOne asks, and hopefully you're with me still here, Anthony. DeOne asks, so you can register your business in one state but operate in another. I'll let you take that one, but I'm assuming most cases you would probably need to get registered in both locations. Oh. Sure, Anthony will be back here in a second. Okay. Yeah. Anthony, I was going to say, or I did say, DeOne asks, so you can register your business in one state but operate in another. And I'm assuming that's a no in most situations, but I'll let you field that one.
Yeah, it's pretty much a no. If you register, you might be able to operate in another city, like outside of your state, but you'd have to make sure that like you are, you know, licensed properly by that state. It really depends on how the city's laws work. Because it's pretty much, you know, city to city things. But if you're gonna like spend a lot of time, like for instance, if you want to open up another food truck in another state, you'll almost assuredly need to license that food truck in that state to operate there. But if you're like doing like a one-day event or something, there's a good chance you'll have to register, but you know, there's a very small chance. So this is one of their might.
Let's see here. So Dennis mentions Texas needs a food managers and City of Austin requires one as well. Someone on the truck needs to have a food manager's certificate for the city. Okay, so yeah, different everywhere you go. Definitely. Carlene asks, do you need to pass all inspections in order to receive a permit? Please explain the process.
Yeah, usually like if you are in violation of, you know, in terms of any permit, you won't be able to like operate. And so like there's kind of two ways to look at it. The first way is like before when you're trying to get the business registered, you're trying to get like initial approval essentially. You have to make sure that you pass all these inspections to be able to go. But then like, you know, once the business is going, you're going to get inspected from time to time to make sure that you're in compliance. And some places will have this like you failed, but you're under probation kind of thing. And some places are just like, you failed, you're shut down until you fix it, and you go from there. And so, again, that really is dependent on where you are, but at least when you're getting started, you won't be able to like operate the food truck until you prove that your truck isn't a safety hazard, in terms of fire inspection, for instance. And when it comes to like, serving food, you won't be able to operate until you prove that you're not serving poison or, salmonella. And so they're not going to like let you go until you get approved for all of these things.
So yeah, we'll send over the checklist. I mean, the checklist is in the class material for this week, but basically at a high level, with all those serve safe requirements and all of those kind of different requirements aside, generally speaking, it's city, state, health, fire, and then sometimes gas. Is that right? Those are like the main ones you got to check off in all areas.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be all the main stuff.
And after all that, you get to own a food truck. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, let us, I guess, feel free to ask any other questions too about the permitting process. Obviously, it's a kind of a long, confusing process, but I think definitely if you take it one step at a time, just break it down into, I know these 4 things that I've got to find out, just take it one step at a time. You'll be able to accomplish it. It just might take a week or 2 of calls and being on hold from time to time.
So one thing I should mention is that like, we talked about that like receiving the permits could take a while, but also like scheduling for the permits and scheduling for the inspections, that part could also take a while. So you really want to like find out what the timetables are as you're going through this as well. The city offices will have that information, and some permitting departments will, have different timelines than others. So like I said, like the health inspection was like on the scale of a couple weeks, and the fire marshal, I just called and they were like, can you come in today? And I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. Okay, I'll be there this afternoon, kind of thing. What were you saying, Brett? Sorry, I cut you off.
No, I was just going to say if there's anything else specifically that you wanted to add from the permit perspective side. Laws side.
Yeah, I think I can add this nice transition. Is like as you are finding out what permits are required, and what the steps are required to get those permits, that can help inform you on how you're going to actually like lay out and build your food truck. And I think that's what we're going to talk about next, right?
That's right.
All right. So you guys have asked lots of questions before about like new versus used and truck versus trailer. And I hope you guys bring up those questions again, because we have lots to share on that. But when thinking about what goes in your truck, let's talk about this from like a permitting process point of view. So like for the health inspector, they're going to want to see most likely that you have like a 3-compartment sink and or a hand washing station. Sometimes they'll say like the 3-compartment sink is enough. But some, like for here in Albuquerque, we need to have a 3-compartment sink and a hand washing station. So basically 2 sinks. With that sink, you need some way to get water up into your sink. So you probably need like a water bladder to store water on the truck. That means you'll also need a gray water bladder to store all the waste. And in order to get the water through the plumbing, you'll probably need a water pump. And those are relatively cheap. We're not talking about like thousands of dollars here for this kind of equipment. But these are the things that you want to think about. At least the health inspector is going to want to see that you have this, this, and this. Part of the plumbing also, you'll need a water heater, not just a water pump to move the water through the pipes, but a water heater so that you have warm water and cold water. Because I think also part of the requirements, and this again depends on your city, because for instance, outside of Albuquerque, you just need to be able to hold water on the truck, but inside Albuquerque, they want you to operate a little bit more like a restaurant, and you have to have a water heater so that the water has to be a certain temperature for it to be like safe serve requirement. And then also, you'll have like your dish cleaning, either like quaternary ammonia or bleach, depending on like what the health inspectors require. So
Sorry, I think you.
Yeah, where did I stop? Where did I just stop?
I'm not even exactly sure.
I think I noticed that I said like bleach cleaning solutions right before I cut out, and that was pretty much where I left off. Like, so yeah, you need to think about the cleaning solutions, and that's a question for the health inspector for sure. Let's see. So outside of like sinks, both kinds of sinks, bleach or quat ammonia, water pump, and water heater. As far as like health inspection goes, you also need to like make sure that you have like buckets and rags so you can clean all your surfaces. You need to make sure that if you're going to do like, depending on what kind of food service you're going to do, you might need a hot holding station and you might need cold holding. You need to make sure that your fridges and freezers can actually maintain the temperature required by the health inspection. And so that again is part of like what the health inspection will be. They'll test the fridge, they'll test the freezer, they'll test your hot holding stations and check the temperatures of all of this stuff. They'll actually check the temperatures of the food that you're keeping in the truck to see if those are at the proper temperature. For us, the initial health inspection, because like there wasn't any food in the truck, they just like asked you to turn it on to show that it like was working and to like stick your hand in and like just make sure that it's reasonably to temperature. Dennis Spencer asked, what about a portable toilet? And I've never seen anybody say you have to or have not like have that. But if you do have like a portable toilet, I'm pretty sure that they would require a separate bladder for that. Like if that's allowable from a health inspector point of view, they'll want to make sure that the waste station from the toilet is separate from the food waste. And that's probably like they'll list that under like black water essentially. And that's like a whole different kind of like cleaning thing. One other thing that they may or may not check for, especially when it comes to like your commissary, is where you're going to dump your waste, the gray water or black water bladders from your truck. For us, they don't really care, but the role of like the commissary is to like have that waste.
So when you are going and getting your health inspection, or you're compiling your like city and state local requirements, they're going to have that information for what you need installed on your unit, right? So while you're doing that process, you'll find out what specific like equipment you need installed to like operate legally, correct?
from a
I think we missed your answer on that one, unfortunately. I think you blacked out on me. But yeah, I think typically that's
legal standpoint. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, this is a annoying. Anyways, they'll definitely information out, and they like from a legal point of view, they want to make sure that
Say, Anthony, can you hear me now by chance?
I can hear you now.
I'm just going to remove the video part to try to speed everything up because this is, and we apologize for these technical issues. I've never had so many issues with YouTube acting up like this before, but we'll just look at your smiling face instead. And hopefully this will resolve the like audio issues that we're having, and we can do it this way.
All right. Well, let me know if I cut out too, and then I'll also join you in the black void.
Okay. I think you already are in the black void. I think.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah. Where do we leave off?
Where you go to, like where you would actually go to find out what equipment you need installed, from a legal point of view. So like you would, as you're compiling your state requirements, then you would also like, as you're getting that, the city's going to provide you with the information that they need about the equipment that you need installed on your truck, correct?
They might not tell you the equipment that you'll need. They'll just say like that if you have this equipment, it has to have these certain standards and certificate like specifications.
Okay.
So when it comes to like actually figuring out what stuff to put on your truck, that's where the builder comes into play. So like you'll say like, okay, you know, obviously like if I'm doing, let's say barbecue, right? I need to be able to keep the food hot. And if I'm doing like side dishes, like let's say, you know, macaroni salad or potato salad, then I'll need to keep some of that stuff cold. And so the builder will say, okay, for barbecue, you can either have this hot holding station, or we can just like, you know, your smoker can actually do that job. So here's the smoker that we have that'll support all of this food. You know, if you have like fridges, if you need a fridge, they'll say these are the different sizes of fridges. That we keep things. Brett, can you hear me?
Now I can, but yeah, you broke up temporarily there. I know this is super annoying. Not your fault, obviously.
I'm going. Can you hear me like clearly now if I just keep talking?
Yeah, you sound good in this moment.
Okay, so what I was saying was like the builder and the builder would kind of work with the regulations and specifications that you're required to have and try and fit the needs that you have, both like for like, you know, just food capacity wise, and then also for like, you know, safety and legislation wise. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Regina asked, do you think I'd be able to put a proofer on my truck? I don't even know what that is.
I think she's referring to like for breads and stuff. And yeah, all of the kitchen equipment that gets put in trucks, I don't know if this has changed in the past, like, 2 or 3 years, but it's all basically just equipment that goes on. Yeah, it's for bread. It's all the equipment that would just be in a normal standard kitchen anyway, and they just like bolt it to the walls. So, so they should, they should be able to, if they can put, a giant KitchenAid on the truck or a prep table, they can also put a proofer. It's just a matter of making sure that it's stable enough to travel, because I don't think you'll be proofing while you're driving. But yeah.
No proofing while driving. That's definitely distracting.
Yeah, don't proof and drive.
So I guess tell us about how you got your truck. Just out of curiosity, so we can learn what not to do, and
yeah,
the cautionary tale.
Yeah, for sure. And please cut me off if I start dipping in and out. But so basically what I did was I just did a Google search for like New Mexico food truck builders, and I found a couple of places, and I had a very specific budget. So my budget originally was like $40,000, and then I found out that the loan we were going to get was only going to be for $25,000, and so our budget shrank to like $30,000 to $35,000. So I basically tried to find like a builder who could work within that budget. I went on like every website I could find and like did their like online quote thing, and a couple of them actually like didn't even really get back to me, which is no good for business. So I found this one guy out of El Paso who could do it within my budget, and he sent me some pictures of the work that he had done. But the first red flag was that he wouldn't tell me like any Albuquerque food trucks that he had worked on, so that I could go like, I asked if I could go like, if he could tell me who he's done so I could go see them and talk to them. Like, he wouldn't tell me that information. He said it was like privileged client information. The second weird thing was like when we went to wire the money for the first like payment, because he wanted half up front, which is, that's pretty standard, I thought. So when I went to wire the money, the business was actually like registered in his wife's name instead of his name, and his wife didn't have anything to do with the business whatsoever. And so, at first I thought it was like a scam, but then he just like explained the situation, and so we paid it. But that should have also been like a major red flag. The final red flag, I mean, this is where it turned out to be like okay, but the final red flag was like when we went to go pick up the truck, he made me meet him in Las Cruces, New Mexico, which is 4 hours south of here, and there was like all of these weird hiccups with the registration and licensing here in New Mexico, and it ended up working out okay. But it turned out that there were two other trucks that he had built simultaneously to mine that we all opened up on like the same day. And I think I talked about this last week. But one of those food trucks like never really got off the ground. Like it came out for like a couple of events, but they had like major electrical failures constantly. And the guy he wouldn't help them, even though they had like, he had like the 6-month warranty on all the trucks. The other guy had a coffee truck, and so really only one thing could fail, and it was like the coffee machine. And he never really had any problems. So we were kind of fortunate that we didn't have any major problems, except that when we first got started, like even before our first vending day, we found out that like the propane line wasn't flowing properly, and I had to take the whole freaking truck apart just to get to where the propane line was to figure out what was possibly happening here. And it turns out that in our like fire safety suppression system, the pin that like is like the safety cutoff valve was in the closed position. Like it had gotten accidentally tripped. And it actually turned out that this would happen a couple of times later. So for some reason, like with this type of safety valve, the vibrations of the truck moving would cause the pin to like close the system so we wouldn't get propane through it. But you know, so we spent like a whole week right in the very beginning just trying to figure out why we're not getting propane to our stoves. So that was kind of like a huge nuisance. And the guy didn't really know anything about he didn't know about what was going on, and he didn't know like how to fix it, and he wouldn't come to Albuquerque to fix the problem. So that was also like, you know, a huge problem. But we figured out all the problems. And actually that, you know, was kind of a blessing in disguise because I learned a ton about the food truck and all the mechanical systems and how they work. And so, you know, we've been able to fix these things ourselves, or at least be able to diagnose a problem and take it to like a good quality licensed professional. Say like, hey, I think there's a problem in this area. What do you recommend we do? Can you help us fix it? So on and so forth.
So you wouldn't recommend your food truck builder, Anthony?
No, that's why I'm sharing all. That's why I'm sharing all these tips, because, like, you know, if you guys can find somebody who's willing to show you the quality of their work and somebody who's local, and you know, the one thing I learned is that food trucks themselves aren't like these mystery machines. You know, they're like I just said, they're basically just like normal kitchen equipment bolted inside of a truck. And so you can find, you know, even if somebody doesn't really have the experience of like building food trucks, if they're like good, you know, if they're like a really quality carpenter or really quality electrician, you can bring these people in to build this out. You basically want to find people who are reputable and really high quality. And that's really what like this whole thing is about, is like make sure that you're comfortable and that you trust the people who are going to do this, because this is like the single most important thing for your business.
Carlotta asks, what are the pros and cons between a truck and trailer?
Yeah, so we've talked a little bit about how like if your food truck breaks down, you know, you're kind of SOL that day for business. A trailer, you know, if your truck breaks down, you just go rent another truck or you find another truck to tow your trailer. One of the things that I was actually telling Brett that I was thinking about last night was that like with a trailer, you can also build this thing the exact size and shape that you want and need. Whereas a truck, they come in like specific like sizes, and you can always like, you know, build an extension or you build a trailer attached to it, or you find a bus and get creative. But, you know, essentially like with a food truck, you're limited to the sizes that are allocated by like, you know, GM makes only like this size food truck. So you really gotta like, you're kind of limited to the spaces that you can do. But really the only difference is like maneuverability of each of those items. So that's probably pretty much like the biggest and really only difference between those two.
So concession trailer, you can get more space. You can pull it, which can be really helpful because then you won't get breakdowns. You can always rent a truck very, very affordably to pull a trailer from Lowe's or Home Depot. So that's a good thing too. But truck, obviously, you can navigate that in the city a lot better than a trailer pulling behind something. Let's see. So Stan asks, once the state approves your build plans or you are permitted, are you grandfathered in, or do you have to modify for new regulations or changes? So let's say you got your food truck approved for the first time in 2015. For example, some changes to the law happened in 2018. Do you have to make those changes? That's a good question.
That is a good question. I'm sure it's really city and state specific. Like Stan says, like for instance, I have heard that they may require a mop sink. I think that actually like is really unfair, because if you're required to have a commissary, what's the commissary for if not to provide all of these extra features? Like you're not really expected to like mop your kitchen in the middle of service. No restaurant does that. You're just supposed to, you know, clean it up at the end of the day. You know, requiring that you have a mop sink might be something that's like required to have at least in your commissary. So maybe that's something that you should consider and look into. But otherwise, if you're permitted, you might be grandfathered in, but it really depends on like the inspection process. So if they're going to like, you know, if your business is registered a certain way, then you'll probably be grandfathered in. But if you're going through like regular inspections, then any changes that they make in the inspection and the requirements for the inspection, you'll probably just receive like notice that these changes are in effect, and that at the next inspection, you'll be required to make these modifications.
Have you ever seen, I guess, has this ever happened to you, Anthony, where there's been like a change that you had to make an adjustment to, or have you heard of this before?
Yeah, I've heard of these things happening, but it's never happened to me. It's never happened here in Albuquerque. Albuquerque changes so slowly. It's kind of amazing, actually.
Let's see. I think I don't think this is one of the questions specifically, but it's probably something good to touch on. New versus used. Obviously, you got a used truck that was then outfitted to be a food truck. Would you recommend going that way? Obviously, if you get used, you're going to be able to save money overall, bottom line.
Right.
At the upstart. But if you get new, then, you know, at least in theory, you know, you're not going to have as many breakdowns. That's for sure. You're definitely not going to have engine problems, that sort of thing. Do you have any kind of advice about or thoughts on going new versus used?
Yeah, I'm sure people, you know, are really opinionated in this regard. But for me, you know, just watching and paying attention to, you know, food trucks around me, I've seen like new food trucks, like new with an actual new truck with new equipment, break down as frequently as like some of the used trucks with used equipment. And so like to me, it never really made sense to, you know, fork over all of this cash for new like sparkling brand new everything when you're just as susceptible to those issues as if you bought used. I think really in this case it comes down to like the quality of the builder that you go with and what kind of warranty they provide on like the equipment and also like the truck itself. And then also like the one extra step is like if you can find a, you know, a vehicle, an auto repair shop, a mechanic who you really trust as well to help make sure that your truck is in tip-top shape. So an example of that was how when we were starting, we were looking at already built trucks. We weren't looking at like having one built. And I almost bought this one truck for like $15,000. It was basically going to be used. I mean, the way it was built was basically only for baking. And so we were going to just like add a couple of things to it and take out some of the baking equipment. And we took it to a mechanic that I really trusted. And he looked at it and he was like, this thing is like completely rusted out on the underside. Like if you hit a bump too hard, you might lose something very something very valuable, like mechanically for the truck itself, and who knows what'll happen with all the kitchen equipment. So really, like, you want to make sure that you have like kind of just a good team around you. So from the builder to mechanics, because you're thinking about the longevity of your business, not just getting it started, but also how long can you make this thing go, in the future.
George asks, are the equipment, like, is it just regular kitchen equipment or that you get installed into a food truck, or is it like specifically special food truck equipment? And also, do the inspectors look at the quality of the equipment at all?
So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a couple of builders right now who like specialize in making food truck equipment, but these things aren't like refrigerators and stoves. They're not like amazing modern marvels of machinery. They're kind of just some kind of electrical outlet. So the vast majority of food trucks and food truck builders, you're going to find like just regular industrial kitchen equipment. And I make that distinction because we're not just going to like Sears and buying like, the really nice stainless steel fridge that they see there. You're going to like dealers and buying like their quality equipment. So it's like heavier duty than like than regular commercial stuff. It's not like designed specifically for a food truck, if that makes sense. And I would say like 90% of it is definitely that way. And then let's see, as far as the inspectors looking at the quality of the equipment, I think in most cases they don't care. And the inspectors that I've talked to don't care the quality of equipment. They care about, does this meet the standards? Does this hold food at the temperatures that it's required? Does the sink, operate in the way that it's required? So they're not really looking at the quality. They're looking, does it meet these minimum standards?
And Katie names her food truck Helga, which I love. I just always love the name Helga. I think that's a good, sturdy name. I like that for a food truck.
That is a good, sturdy name.
Yep. That is Helga. Helga is not breaking down. She's gonna get you from point A to point B.
That's a good, it's a good point that Katie brings up, though, and I think we've talked about this in the past. Is that if you are going the used truck route, you can't really do better than going with like delivery vehicle providers, because those, like, if you're going like UPS or DHL or like you said, Snap-on Tools, these vehicles are like inspected and maintained regularly, so that they're like pretty high quality, and they have like corporate policies that say like you can only we'll only have these trucks in service for like 3 years and 50,000 miles or 100,000 miles or whatever. And so they're maintained to be really safe standards, and you can probably get them at a really good price because
I'm not sure if you broke off there, Anthony, but I was going to say too, and I just was reminded about this from the used food truck perspective. One of our past students, his name is Gonzo. He recently started and just opened his own. Basically, he does rotisserie chicken, but it's like a Peruvian style of rotisserie chicken. That's just really, really interesting. So where he actually was able to find his food truck, he went to a website called govdeals.com and basically was able to find a food truck that was up at auction online, and it's govdeals.com. he said that he was able to get it for like under $8,000 for like his actual food truck, and then of course he had to get it modified, had to get equipment installed into it, all of that sort of thing. But he really recommended, if you have a longer time horizon and you got some patience, you can, that's like an option that worked out really well for him. Anyways, so that's another place to check out if you want to do the used route and try to launch it on more of a budget. That's working for.
Yeah.
Let's see. One other thing too, and hopefully hopefully we're back and everybody can hear us okay, but electrical power, obviously that's you've got all this different equipment running on there, and especially concepts like if you're going to be doing coffee, running a coffee machine requires a ton of power. If you're going to be having an ice cream or like a froyo type truck, again, that takes just tons and tons of power on there. I guess, I feel like that's like a topic that some people overlook, but do you have any, like, recommendations for like a generator that you should look out for? Obviously, if you work through a builder, they're going to be able to help you out with the, figuring out what electrical requirements you need. But do you have any best practices on that you can share, Anthony?
Yeah. So can you hear me?
Yep. Yeah, you sound good.
Cool. So best practices is like to figure out what size generator you need is just to like add up the wattage of all of the electrical equipment you have on the truck. So that includes like your water pump, your water heater, if you have an AC, that thing too, fridges, freezers, any of that stuff, add up all the wattage. And it's usually written on a tag, either on the plug or on the device somewhere. If it doesn't have the wattage listed, all you have to do is multiply the voltage that's needed to power it by the current, and those two pieces of information are absolutely written on the devices themselves. So you just multiply those two things to get the wattage, and then you just add up the wattage of all of those things. So that's basically saying, like, if I turned all of this stuff on at the same time, what's the required wattage? And the only time that you really turn everything on at the same time is probably like the dead of summer when you need the air conditioner, or the dead of winter when you need the heater. But that's kind of how you figure out, the size. I definitely recommend, in some cases, the food truck builder will say, like, they'll just add the cost of the generator to your, quote or whatever. And they'll also do the calculations. Some builders, maybe they don't calculate that, or they say like, okay, it's going to be this much extra for a generator. And you can pretty much comparison shop. You can say like, okay, what generator are you planning on sticking on the truck? And then go research how much that costs. And, you can see if they're just throwing that on there for markup, or if you're actually like, you're getting a fair price for it. But the other thing to think about with power, so if you're in a situation where you need to figure out what the generator requirements are, we bought a Generac generator, brand new. It's actually designed to be portable, and we've had like a platform built to like mount this thing right to the back of the truck. And we determined that a 10 kilowatt generator would be all that we ever needed. Sometimes you can get these things like you're looking for silent generators, like the ones that make no noise or very little noise. And those things are usually much more expensive. But my big tip, honestly, is like, if you're looking to buy a generator, check Amazon first. The reason why I say that is, like, when we bought ours, we looked everywhere. We looked at like the company itself and like how to buy, we looked for Generac on their website, how to buy it. We checked like Home Depot and those kinds of places. And we found out that like Amazon had the lowest price by like I think it was like $100, but also the fact that we didn't have to pay shipping.
Yeah, and the shipping component is huge, especially with the generator. That can be super, super costly.
Like, you know, a couple. So we saved like $500 by buying it on Amazon. So if you have that option, give it a try. I think Amazon operates in most states now, so that like tax thing might not work out, but the shipping for sure will save you money.
One other thing too, there's not specifically a question about this, but wanted to make sure we get to it. The layout of your actual kitchen that you're using. Obviously, you know, if you work through a builder, which is, you know, they should have some like ideas, especially if you're building like a common type of food truck. So, you know, you want to do hamburgers, you want to do coffee, or, you know what I mean? Something that isn't completely outside the box. They'll probably have recommendations for like, yeah, let's put the fridge here. You know, we recommend putting the grill here, the deep fryers over there, that sort of thing. But assuming you don't have that, like, or you just want to make sure that you're doing something right for you, do you have any like tips for like figuring out what type of a layout would be good within your food truck to even like request or to at least think about before you get your truck built, so that you're not kind of like, oh, I really wish this fridge wouldn't have been on the other side of the truck, because now like when I'm assembling hamburgers, I have to go like to the opposite side of my vehicle just to like complete this menu item.
Yeah, so the way right, you took the words right out of my mouth. The way that we built our truck, we have like our stove along like the back wall. We have sink on the, you know, I'll just orient the truck so that the engine is facing north. So the stove is on the south side, our service window is on the east side, and the sink is on the west side. So we put all our like prep stations on the service side of the truck, and then our cleaning stuff is on the opposite side of the truck. There's maybe like 2 feet of space between the service tables and the sinks, and the fridge is, you know, towards the engine side of the truck, and obviously the stove is on the opposite side. So we thought that it would be fine, but you know, if it's a really busy day and it's just the two of us, one of us, you know, is taking orders while the other is like running behind and like constantly bumping, or you know, one of us will be cooking while the other one has to go from the service window to the fridge over to the back of the truck. So it's not the most ideal layout. So one thing that I always recommend, and we thought it was going to be fine, and we even tested it. One thing that I always recommend in this case is when you talk to the builder, they'll send you, you know, with the quote of how much it costs, they should send you like a little schematic, kind of like a blueprint of what your truck layout will look like with all of the measurements on it. So what I always recommend is when you get that, you know, maybe like take an area of your house and like put string or rope on the floor or tape, and kind of like tape off these dimensions so you can kind of get a visual space for how big this stuff actually is and how much space you're going to have to move around. And then just like put a couple people in that area and see, you know, what it's like to move around the space and try and simulate, you know, like a busy environment. Like if you have stuff going on one side of the truck and you need to get to the other side, what's that like when there's somebody standing in your way? You'll kind of work out this like little dance of how to operate with somebody constantly behind you. But you can curb a lot of that just by figuring out, you know, exactly where everything should be located. And, you know, before you say, go ahead, build this thing, you have the option of saying, hey, let's move the fridge over here. I want the stove in this area. And they'll make that happen for you. And they should send you, like, for all the revisions, the builder should send you updated blueprints. So definitely, like, ask about what that process looks like.
Yeah. And ask for their feedback too, because especially if they're somebody that has built a lot of trucks, they've probably encountered some like reasons why they don't do things a certain way. So definitely be like open to it. Like, hey, what do you think of this? Do you have any feedback on like the placement of this? Is there something else you'd recommend? Just yeah, be open to that, and definitely learn from their advice, and plan out that future kitchen layout in your kitchen and or bedroom, or wherever you've got space to do it in your house or apartment. But I think that's all the questions, at least I'm seeing on the chat side. Apologize for going a little bit long, but just with the tech issues, I think it's important to get through a lot of these items. Is there anything else you wanted to add, just either on the food truck laws or the build out part, Anthony?
Yeah, we talked about the permitting, and I mentioned like the fire safety inspection. And in this week's materials, I like document like exactly the kinds of stuff you should be looking for. But I feel like the fire inspection is actually really important to know what they require way ahead of time, because those things they actually build into the truck. So for instance, like, your city might require a certain type of fire suppression system, and that thing is not cheap, and it's also not easy to take out or install or remove. So if you know exactly what that is, you can go to the builder and say, hey, we need this type of fire suppression system. Other stuff like fire extinguishers and types of fire extinguishers are required, but you can after you get the food truck, you can have those, you can buy them afterwards, or, you can say to the food truck builder, here's like what I require right now, and I'll get back to you in like a couple weeks when I find out what the fire extinguisher needs are, because they can add those, sort of late in the game. It's not like important to the actual build out of the truck. So, we talked about the health inspector and the safety requirements, but those are kind of things that are required in the general kitchen tools. But the fire inspection part is actually like they're building something that will go over the stove or over your prep area, and you'll need to know like exactly what that is in order to build your truck out to code. So I think that was all I really wanted to add.
Very good. The other thing I was just going to say too, as everybody is working through their business plans and putting that together for like the last week's class to present, just know that like we totally get, and like Anthony totally gets, that really 8 weeks to put together a business plan, especially some sections, can be pretty hard, right? Because like even getting the health requirements together in your city, that might take a couple of weeks, right? So if you feel like you're falling like a little bit behind in certain sections, like don't stress about it. Just take it 1 week at a time. And again, just know too that like even if you put together just a partial business plan or a pitch deck, like we said before, that like even that is really, really beneficial just to review part of it as well. And we've had tons of people like that take this course literally like 2 times before starting, or like as they're almost about to start, they'll take it the second time, and you can take it a second time for free. So there's no issue with that either. We totally get that. It just takes time. You're building a business from the ground up. It takes time to start it and plan for it and get it right. So we're definitely here for you through each step of that process. But with that being said, looking ahead to next week is actually probably one of either my favorite week or maybe my second favorite week. My favorite week might be when we bring in a different Food Truck Academy graduate, so that I don't have to talk to Anthony the whole time. My second favorite, but next week is all about making money. So basically just generating more income in your business, getting more catering gigs, finding business when you're brand new in an area, finding good, profitable locations, and just really diving into how you can start generating money like as quickly as possible as soon as you've got all this health inspection stuff taken care of. That way you can create your own food truck empire. I guess that's about all I have. Do you have anything else, Anthony? I'm assuming that's a no, but I hear a cough. But I guess thanks to everybody for attending, and we'll see you all next week at the regular time. Thanks a lot.